Good to meet you too, Ryan. Thank you for jumping on the show.
Yeah, of course.
First off, I got to ask you about that background, my friend. What's going on there?
Really love tortoises.
Okay, cool. Do you know that particular tortoise? Does he have a name?
I don't. But I'd be super stoked. Look how judgy that tortoise looks.
It does look majestic. I'm very impressed. I don't have anything.
Not impressed by anything.
I mean, they're very stoic, right? They always look very nonplussed. They're just kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the most fascinating things about them, every time I've been to the zoo and I've like encountered them in the wild, is I just think about the fact that they live for like 150 years. Like they're so ancient and stoic and majestic creatures. Love it. Great background choice.
I think that's why they're so easily shift into the face of having this like, oh yeah, you think you're special, don't
you? you stupid human. You have no idea.
Yeah. I saw the wheel being invented, dickweed.
Yeah, 100%. I lived through the entire Industrial Revolution. What have you got? Fucking nothing.
If you wrote a song, I saw the invention of the car.
Ryan, we're here to talk about Poison the Well. We're here to talk about the new record. I know that you've been doing back-to-back interviews pretty much today and yesterday, so I'm sure you've been asked 1,000 questions. So I wanted to kind of open up the floor at the very top of the show to kind of ask you, what's one aspect about the record and the return of Poison the Well in the studio that you haven't been asked about, that you would like to talk about?
Nothing, I guess, has been spoken about the sort of aspect of all of us coming together and still, after knowing each other and working together for almost 30 years, we all still get along.
Yeah.
Like, we all still get along, and outside of this band, we're still part of each other's lives. I think, when the idea of, your band went on hiatus, what's it like? Are you still in touch with them? Like, 3 years after we stopped touring, I was at a Quicksand show with Jeff in New York. Like, none of us ever stopped being part of each other's lives. So it's pretty interesting that we were able to interact for so long, and the idea of, like, for a long time making new music was like, maybe not, right? And then we worked on something that was new, and I jokingly said, well, that was great, we should, not jokingly, but matter of factly, I was like, oh, we should do that again. And then it would actually come to pass. I had no fucking clue that was going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point to raise. And kind of jumping off that, I would ask, like, do you think it's that consistency, right? Like being able to kind of have the guys in your life, both in the band and outside of the band, that allowed you to write a record that is so kind of cohesive and so kind of like locked into the band's identity. Like it feels like you never left. Like 17 years between records, but it feels like it came out directly after, the Tropic Rot.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like that for me. In the
I can imagine.
Like they sound pretty different and they have different intentions.
Sure.
But there was definitely still a sort of fluidity to us working together. It took a bit to figure out, because everyone is a bit different now than they were when we were in our 20s. But
sure.
there was a sense of, ease with patience. And, when we were working on something, just, people were able to say, just give me a second, I'm going to get there. Whereas before it would have been a fight. Now it was much easier. So I think if we would have maintained that sort of spirit that we had in 2009, I don't know if it would have happened. I think everyone needed a lot more patience than normal to get the idea out on this one.
Yeah, and I can understand that. Like, there's I guess, like an inherent level of like growing up and kind of maturity that comes to kind of leaving a band in a particular place and time and picking things up, 10, 15, 17 years down the track. Do you hear bits of your youth in the record, or is it very much a record that captures where you are now?
No, I hear more of my youth in this new record than I did in our last record before this.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
You go through that sort of leapfrog where you stop judging yourself as a youth. And you're just like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Like, I'm not, the most cringeworthy character on the planet, right? It's like, and you start to sort of embrace your, that innocent fool that you used to be.
Yeah. I think,
and
like,
you kind of long for some of it, if I could find a way to have one day a year where, the epicenter of my ambition in life is to go to a punk show or a hardcore show and then drink coffee and eat French fries at a diner, like, it would be a rewarding one day a year.
Yeah, but life has a way of kind of getting in the way of those simple pleasures. So I think it's a testament to both you and the guys in being able to pick the band up again, despite all of that additional kind of, adult pressure that has been layered on through life in the intervening time, and still come through with a record that connects as viscerally as those previous records that you might have been able to do in your 20s and 30s. When you guys initially had the conversation, like you kind of mentioned before, like you weren't sure if you were going to do another record, when that finally became an option, was there a conversation on what that record should be? Or did it just kind of organically evolve as you started to write and to play around with demos and various bits and pieces?
There were some conversations that were, I think, all over the place about it. And, at the end of the day, would have added up to be, I want a record to sound orange, like as completely just obtuse as that. And
yeah.
And then I think one of the things that made me really happy about making this record was we had all these conversations and then started writing songs, and none of what we talked about happened because it was just whatever was coming out at that moment. And I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah. The conversation about what we might want it to be was, made me painfully uncomfortable. And then when we just started writing it, I was like, oh, it's just going to be what it is. Great. I'm comfortable with. I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah. That's interesting to me.
I'm glad that, the idea of having a record that sounds like Purple Vomit at a baseball game wasn't achieved.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to articulate, I guess, to others or even to yourself, like what you want to get out of your art and what you want to like do with your instrument, whether that be music, whether that be, I don't know, creative art, sculpting, whatever the fuck it is. But sometimes it's hard to articulate the stuff that's in here and put it out in the material world. When you started writing material for this record, did you have a particular sanctuary or somewhere where you would go to try and like do that creative process, or were you just jamming it in wherever you had time?
A bit of both. I was still working a lot during the first portion of writing the record.
Yeah.
And then when we finally went to finish it last year, it was a lot of, my living room was probably the place that I was the most comfortable being creative, for the excuse of not having to put on shoes to do it. But, there was no real sanctuary, just my living space as it was where I did most of it, which may or may not be the best choice. It's a bit claustrophobic to be in your house for days on end and not leave and just play guitar and go through the ins and outs of self-doubt. But maybe that's just part of the way I do it. You know, everybody has a different thing.
Yeah. And I mean, look, a lot of the riffs on the record definitely sound barefoot. So I can understand like not wanting to have shoes. That makes a lot of sense.
And one of the things that always happens is your feet get better looking as you get older.
Of course. You've got stately gentleman feet now, so it comes through on the record. You talked about self-doubt just then. I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. Was there any sense of like apprehension or maybe trepidation in kind of going back to a project like Poison the Well that in ways we've just kind of discussed kind of captures a particular moment in time for you with your youth, your 20s? You're coming back to it now, older, wiser, more mature. Were you kind of just like, don't know how this is going to go?
There was, is, and always will be a sense of apprehension for me.
Okay.
In making things that come from my internal monologue.
And how did you push through that? Do you have any methods, or were you just kind of like, well, what'll be will be. I'll just do the thing?
I just didn't want to not do it. I think my desire to do it was greater than my desire to not do it. And, you know,
like again, all good things, overriding not doing the thing by doing the thing.
Yeah. And, you know, I think had Jeff and Chris not been so supportive, it probably wouldn't have happened. So, you know, the existence of this record hinges on those two people very greatly. Because there was definitely moments where I was like, this ain't gonna work. But here we are.
Here we are talking about the record. And look, I think it's a phenomenal record, and I think you should be incredibly stoked at what you guys have achieved. Like I mentioned before, I find it to be a very cohesive record, and I feel like it fits in the larger catalog of the band discography incredibly well. I hear shades of all of the previous Poison the Well records contained in Peace in Place, which I think in any comeback record is kind of what you're kind of aiming for, really, to kind of remind people like this is what we do, and we can do lots of different things. I wanted to ask you though, do you feel like there's any new elements or influences that you brought into this record that are different to previous Poison the Well records?
One of the things I can do now before that I couldn't do very well is edit myself.
Okay.
You know, I think one of the things that I can hear that taking a break helped was like, I don't have to try every fucking idea ever. And, you know, I don't have to I don't get the same gratification of doing something just because it's unexpected. If it's doing something because it's unexpected and effective, then that's great. But just because it's unexpected doesn't add value.
Yeah. Sometimes spontaneity is just kind of spontaneity in of itself. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily have value just because it comes out of thin air. So yeah. I want to touch on now this idea of legacy. Because in listening to the record, and I've gone through it a bunch of times and had different thoughts and feelings on it, I think not only is it an incredible record, but it really does, I think for me, kind of underline just how important Poison the Well have been for this particular genre of heavy music. I mean, you guys got your start in the late 90s. You were doing records throughout the 2000s. you missed the 2010s and you've come back in the 2020s with a new record that still sounds incredibly touched in to all of those different eras of the band. So to kind of kick off that conversation, do you reflect on your legacy as part of Poison the Well in the context of metalcore and the other bands that you've helped influence? Does that weigh on you at all? Do you just put it out of sight, out of mind?
No, I don't think I'm able to onboard that concept.
Okay. Why is that, do you think?
I can't look at the situation subjectively or objectively. I'm too connected to the whole situation, and
sure.
I don't think I can just, I think there's plenty of other people that were doing something similar and had similar ideas to us to think that what we did was anything more than just the only thing we knew how to do. So here we are, right? Yeah. And in my head, I just don't think it doesn't compute to me.
Yeah,
I'm appreciative of the kind words, and I have been a person that's told other musicians or songwriters of like how much they've impacted me. It's just my brain's broken if it happens to me. What?
Well, I would argue that by re-entering the fray, so to speak, and putting out a record this good, it's gonna happen to you, Ryan. I'm sorry. People are gonna be like, man, we needed this record. We needed you to come back.
I hope everyone's ready for a dose of awkward then.
Not at all. Not at all. But I do think it is a point worth underlining that, like, your band has been incredibly influential in kind of showing people what this genre of music is capable of. And I would argue that you're one of, like, if not the most forward-thinking band that the genre has, like, produced, just in being able to incorporate different influences, color outside the lines, not chase the trends, and you've kind of just done your own thing in ways that have become incredibly influential for bands that are, your contemporaries now, but also much younger bands. I looked at the tour lineup that you have with Converge for the album tour, and a band like Balmorra are on that tour. That's a band that wouldn't exist without Poison the Well, and I can say that fairly confidently. Do you feel, I don't know, responsible in some way for kind of like creating music that has influenced other people to create their own music?
If you take the concept of the music out of it,
yeah,
then I can understand it a little better.
Sure.
If you're just like, if you being daring helps someone else be daring, I can understand that concept. But
okay,
from an art for art perspective, I don't think I quite get it. But it's funny that you would bring it up whether I feel responsible or not. A friend of mine named Tom Sheehan, who sings in a band called Indecision.
Oh my God, love Indecision.
Loves to find things and just be like, that's your fault. And and it's a funny game he plays on me. I don't know if it's a band I like or if it's K-pop Demon Hunters, and he'll just tell me it's my fault.
Okay.
So
he's funny. He's like sending you videos of bands that are doing like the sing scream, like thing, or like breakdowns or whatever, and he's like, that's your fault, Ryan. You did that shit. That's on you.
Or it's a polka band, and he's like, that's your fault.
Okay, I see it. Yeah. He's like, you got the kids onto spaghetti western music, like that's on you.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I guess
it's all Gorilla Biscuit's fault, though.
That's true.
Trumpet intro.
Yeah.
On New Direction. It's Gorilla Biscuit's fault. It's not my fault.
I mean, they created ska, right? Everyone knows that. That's their fault.
What a good band.
In terms of playing songs live from the record, have you had much of an opportunity to play some of the deeper cuts from the record in a live setting yet? Or are you guys still kind of like working on that?
No, I think Friday will be the maiden voyage for a lot of those songs.
Okay. Are there any cuts on the record that people might not have heard yet that you're excited to kind of blow the cobwebs off and see how they go on stage?
Yeah, we'll be playing the first song on the record, and I'm really excited about playing that.
I gotta say, one hell of an opener, up there with Botchler for like top Poison the Well openers.
It was one of the songs I was sort of the most gratified with. How I heard it in my head is how it came out in the end, and I was like, oh, I rarely get that lucky, and I was like, I got that lucky.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a kick-ass song. It rules. Yeah. In terms of producing the record, can you talk to me a little bit about the decision to go with Will Putney and what that experience was like?
He remastered our first two records sometime in like 2010, I want to say.
Yeah, I have the vinyl release of those remasters. They're impeccable. During
that process, him and I had a meal at a diner in New Jersey where we ate French fries and drank coffee. And just the course of that meal, I was like, I want to make a record with that guy if I ever make a record again.
Yeah.
And then I remember I was talking to our friend Tom, and he was like, who would you want to record it? And I said, Will. And he was like, I was not expecting that. And I was like,
really? Oh. Okay.
Yeah. I've always wanted to make a record with that guy.
Yeah.
He's got an interesting brain.
He does. He's a friend of the show. We caught up with him when he was in Australia for the Better Lovers run that they did a couple of months ago. Very funny guy. But it's interesting that your friend kind of said, oh, he's not who I would have picked you guys wanting to go with. I think that's a very curious response, because I think if I was to name, maybe like 3 producers that have shaped the course of like modern metalcore for the last like 25 years, Will's name would be one of those 3. And I think he's incredibly prolific, talented, knows the genre inside and out, has worked with a bunch of different bands. And when I saw that he was tapped to do this record with you guys, I got incredibly pumped. And I was just like, man, he's going to make them sound so fucking good. Like, I knew it. And
I thought it made sense too. I
think absolutely.
It was more of a preconceived notion that maybe I would not want to work with a heavy music person. And I was like, no, I want to work with a heavy music person. Every heavy music person I know has the dark side of odd pop music in them.
Of course. We just had Kurt Ballou on the show, and Kurt's a weirdo. Like, he's a heavy music guy, but he's also a weirdo guy, and you need that weirdo element. You got to like bring in some other stuff into the heavy stuff.
Exactly. You have to like Napalm Death and ABBA for me to not find you suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. You got to find the merits in like, European death metal and Enya. You got to like cross those wires at least a couple of times.
100%.
On that note, what were you listening to while you were writing and recording Peace in Place?
I was listening to a lot of, it's a compilation, but like the first sort of De Kreutzen record, like full length.
I'm not familiar with that. What's that?
It's like a early 80s Milwaukee hardcore band that I really like. A lot of this Swedish band called Breach.
I love Breach. Incredible band.
Definitely something I listened to quite a bit during the recording of this. I'm always steadily listening to a Japanese band called Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Okay.
It's like not really experimental. It's like synth pop music, but it's fucking amazing.
That sounds cool.
There was one song from another Swedish band called Kometa. It's called Cul-de-sac. I must have listened to it like 600 times over the course of like 3 months.
Shit. Okay.
And they're just kind of cool, kind of in this similar vein as the Cardigans.
Oh, right. Okay.
I listened to a good bit of Slayer.
Which record? Which era?
I went back on a deep dive with Seasons in the Abyss, which has always been my favorite Slayer record.
It's the good record, yeah.
Because I it was at the nice price when I was 14 in 1992 and bought it on cassette. But a lot of that, a ton of Black Sabbath, because I'm always listening to a ton of Black Sabbath. Another kind of odd Midwest hardcore band called Spike and Vein. I really liked. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff peppered in there, but that's what I can remember off the top of my head.
No, see, that's good. There's a lot of like deep cuts and eclectic picks in there, and that's kind of what I expected. I was like, Ryan's a music guy. He's gonna have some cool stuff for me to check out to try and get into the Poison the Well headspace. So I appreciate that.
The Slayer was a dark horse. It had been quite a bit of time since like I'd really listened to a lot of Slayer, but I found myself in Season the Abyss, and I was like, oh, I need speed pick parts. I have to have them. It has to happen.
Yeah, hell yeah. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I want to kind of wrap things up. I'll have links in the show description for people to pre-order the record, and for Australian listeners and watchers to come to the show that you're doing in June. Very excited to check out the show.
Are you coming to the show?
Oh, 100%. You best believe I'm there. Probably the Melbourne show, because that's where I'm based. Yeah.
Great.
I wasn't going to mention this, but I had tickets to see you guys on the tour that you did for the Tropic Rot, and I was in a particularly like kind of like shitty headspace at that time, and I was like, I'm just not going to go to the show, and like I only had a ticket for myself. And it was like, do I really feel like going to a show by myself and being lonely and feeling like kind of shitty or whatever? And I was like in my early 20s, and I was just like, no, I'm just going to give it a miss. And then you guys went on hiatus, and I was like, fuck, okay, shit.
I had tickets to see Lifetime, this New Jersey band, in 1996, and I didn't go to the show because I had a headache, and I never got to see them until they refunded, and I regret it to this day.
Yeah,
because they have a record called Hello Bastards. That's like one of my favorite records. And
incredible record.
I get mad every day I didn't get to see them tour on that record. So mad. Still mad about it.
Well, look, so for a very long time, that's what I thought was happening here. I was like, I had that shot to go see them at a club show, and they're never going to come back. They're never going to do a record. Ryan's put his foot down. It's never going to happen. And here we are. So very, very serendipitous.
Wonderful.
Ryan, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The new record rules. Can't wait to meet you when you're here in June.
I can't wait to meet you as well. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you, mate.
Hello, Owen popping in to say, please sign up for the TPD Patreon. This is what helps us keep the lights on and keep the show going. The link is at the bottom of your screen right now, patreon.com/tpdpod. All of our patrons get exclusive access to Side B of our Roundup episodes, so you get a few extra tracks, as well as our feature album discussion and the full show experience. Our patrons also get exclusive access to behind-the-scenes, off-the-cuff chit-chat from all of our guest episodes. But the patrons are the ones who make all of this happen. For as little as $5 a month, you can sign up to the TPD Patreon, and it really helps us out, really helps us keep the show going. So shout out to all of our patrons, shout out to our executive producer patrons, you're the real ones, and yeah, thank you so much for watching the show.